The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. It is a sunny day here in Southern California. We are taping this on a Friday, and on Tuesday on ESPN at 8 o'clock, the second 30 for 30, it's called 9.79. It's about the 1988 gold medal 100-meter race at the Olympics that Ben Johnson got disqualified for. That's running, and it's terrific. It's really good. It was also one of the most traumatic moments in Canada's sports history. So breaking his podcast silence. He's never been on a podcast before. The great Malcolm Gladwell. What's happening?
Hi, Bill. This is huge for me. Huge.
This is it. You're breaking your podcast virginity right now.
I am. It took a while. I've just been in awe of the podcast. I was scared to join in, but I think this is the right moment.
This was a medium that you'd be good at, but the few times we've done our back and forth, and I've said, why don't we do a podcast here? I was like, no, let's write it out, which is like 100 times harder. We're going to be done in like 45 minutes here, and you'll wonder why we didn't always do it this way. I agree with you, though. It's more fun and more substantial to write about
weeks,
stuff.
Though. I mean, people don't realize how long those things take.
Yeah, they do.
For me, at least. Not for you.
Oh, for me, too. No, you always think it takes me little time, but it takes me a while. But we could not pull off the back and forth, which we were planning on doing about this. So let's talk about it. Ben Johnson, and the documentary captures this at least a little bit, just huge in Canada in the mid-'80s. Like, he was your guy. Explain that whole phenomenon.
It's even more that, for me, it's still almost kind of personal. I was a runner, high school and college runner in Ontario in the late 70s, early 80s. I'm a contemporary of Ben Johnson's, and he is a Jamaican immigrant. I'm partial Jamaican immigrant. And that world, the big Ontario track meet, high school meet, is called OFSA. And OFSA is this weird West Indian happening. The West Indians in Toronto dominate the sprints, and they put on these. You go to OFSA, and underneath the stands, it would be like a giant. It's like you're in Kingston,
right?
And that's the world. So that's the world that I ran in. It's the world Ben Johnson comes out of. It's the world. All of the great Canadian sprinters are all Jamaicans. Donovan Bailey, Desai Williams. All these guys are Mark McCoy. They're all West Indian of some sort. So it's a kind of that. It's weird because now when we think of the world's great sprinting power, we think of Jamaica, but you have to include the Jamaican diaspora in that, right?
Yeah.
Not only do Jamaicans dominate, but Jamaicans dominate when they move to Canada. So that's his. So he was he was the greatest sprinter to come out of this track obsessed world in Ontario, and this documentary, which I think is superb, is just the story of what happened, and it was devastating.
Obviously you were following this pretty well. How worried were you, like in the mid-'80s, that he was cheating?
I have to say it never occurred to me. But
really?
I have always been naive about drugs. But I feel like in the 80s we were all naive about drugs. I mean, some small part of me, when a couple years later, Sammy Sosa and Mark McGuire are going crazy in the home run, that record-setting home run year. Some little part of me said they're taking steroids, but some other larger part of me didn't want to believe that, right? I mean, you wanted to believe it was real. And so I didn't want to know that when I thought about steroids, I thought about the East German swimmers. I didn't think about Canadian runners, right? I mean, I was a runner in Canada. I didn't know anyone who took steroids, and so I was, it turns out, completely deluded, but never occurred to me in a million years.
That is true. We were trained in the 70s and 80s that the only people who were cheating were the people from the communist bloc countries, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't hard to figure out who. I mean, there were some
Cornelia
women on
Ender.
some of those
Remember
teams.
Cornelia Ender, who was an East German swimmer? She looked like Vince Wilfork.
Right.
She was enormous. They don't make women in those shapes naturally. I mean, it was like so completely obvious what was happening over there.
And they didn't really have the testing. Now, this is something that I want to get back to Ben Johnson in Canada, but I think this documentary, the thing that really got me thinking was just, I don't want to say it accuses Carl Lewis of cheating, but it basically sets the groundwork that you could definitely think that he did. And if anything, you're going to lean toward him probably cheating in the 80s versus not cheating in the 80s. How surprised were you about that?
I didn't. Well, this is my only quarrel with the documentary, which I thought was superb. But they do. So they're skating a little bit on. So one of the claims, just for those who haven't seen it, the documentary takes all of the finalists in the famous 1988 men's 100 meters, and the one won by Ben Johnson. Then he gets his medal stripped, and the title is given to Carl Lewis, and points out that virtually everyone in the final, with I think 2 exceptions, at some point in their career gets accused of doping. So It's the height of the steroid era in running, and they want to make they're sort of obliged to bring up any rumor they can about all of the runners, but they're weakest on Lewis. Basically, so they tell you after sort of saying, well, he did test positive this one time. Then they tell you that if the same test had been done today, he wouldn't have tested positive. In other words, the standards on which they base the accusation of you're doping or not have changed, and by today's standards, he would have been clean. It's also unclear. They don't tell you what drug it was, because and this is this other thing that. You could almost do a separate documentary on. People act like drug testing is this straightforward process. You run the urine over some little screen and it comes up yes or no. It's like a pregnancy test. It is so not like a pregnancy test. It is like this. It is the most subjective, complex process. And like if you're measuring whether someone is taking testosterone, you have to establish what their baseline is, and then figure out. Are they above their baseline, right? Now, people's natural levels of testosterone are as varied as their heights and personalities and skin color, right? Who knows what? Bill, I can only imagine testing your testosterone.
I'd be excited.
Maybe your natural level is through the roof, right? So if they did your T, they'd say you're doping, and you'd be like, no, I'm not. I just happen to be incredibly manly. It's hard. My point is that this stuff is an art. And I kind of feel like they were a little unfair to Lewis. I don't buy that Lewis was doping.
You don't buy it? Well, he definitely failed something at some point. But I think it was for amphetamines, or like an elevated for that, right? Wasn't that what they said?
Well, but who knows what it could be? It could be flu medication, which has got amphetamine. Yeah. It could be, it could be Ritalin, which is an amphetamine. He could have had too much caffeine. I mean, unless you tell me precisely what he was supposed to have taken and the protocols used in the test, I feel like it's really unfair to kind of tar him with that brush. And also, look at him. I mean, the one thing, the eyeball test is something that he passes.
Well, the one thing they did a nice job of pointing, I don't want to step on the doc too much, but they were talking about, you're using certain human growth hormones and they can change your teeth and you end up needing braces later.
Yeah.
And, a couple minutes later, all of a sudden there's the shot with Lewis wearing braces when he's in his mid-20s. You could they didn't come out and say it, but you could kind of deduce.
I missed that, really?
Yeah.
How did I miss that?
That was in there. That was at least in the last cut I saw. But yeah, he did have braces in his mid-20s. So, I mean, that's not the good. The only thing is...
I feel like that's a little...
It's circumstantial. There's no question. I mean,
maybe I'm being naive again. I don't know.
But he was so adamant about how clean he was during that era.
Yeah.
And I know probably nobody under 35 gives a crap about Carl Lewis because they weren't there. But for me and my generation, that's a huge thing if Carl Lewis cheated. I feel like he was one of the defining athletes of that whole decade.
He's one of the greatest. He's clearly the greatest long jumper who ever lived. He's one of the greatest track and field athletes of the last 50 years. Yeah, there's no. But if he, There's no question about his.
And somebody who really was kind of robbed in the two moments that where he would have endured, and kind of the way that Usain Bolt, I feel like, is going to endure, because anybody who was there in '08, or I was there in 2012, like, you're never going to forget seeing that. And Carl Lewis in '84, he's basically going against, he was going against the B League. None of the big countries showed up.
Yeah.
And that was that should have been his greatest moment. And then the other problem was he only did those 2 long jumps, and everybody was so excited to see him break the Bob Beamon record. And then he did the one that ensured him the gold medal, and then basically packed it in.
I know, but I have enormous, that was the right decision.
Oh, it was the right decision, but I'm saying, like, he just never had that moment. Even the moment that he probably had was that famous jump that was win-aided. It ended up being overruled. They never even measured it, and it might have been 30 feet, which I think was in like 1983. But and then '88 was his other famous moment when Ben Johnson's just zooming by him, and Lewis is like incredulous with 5 feet to go. Is this happening?
Well, Lewis gets done in because he wanted it too badly, right? And I think as fans, we always, who he reminds me of? He reminds me of, oh God, I forgot his name. The first baseman for the Los Angeles, Steve Garvey.
Yeah.
There's something about Garvey in him, right? You feel like it's a little too polished. He wants it a little bit too badly, and you react. I think unfairly, you react against that as a fan. Carl Lewis would come out and say that he wanted to be a superstar, the most important, And there's something about that I think that rubs us the wrong way.
Yeah, it was the combination of he wasn't cool, and then he really wanted to be famous, and it wasn't just good enough for him to be famous with being one of the greatest track and field athletes of all time. Like he actually wanted his fame to spill over into other realms. And he takes a lot of heat for his singing. He probably takes 100 times more heat for the singing than he should. And if anything, if you're under 30, you might remember the national anthem more than you remember anything he did in track.
Note to self, no singing. But you know what? If you really want to get at the root of the Carl Lewis problem, which is that he is for an athlete, on the effeminate side, right? And there was, from the beginning, I think people had a feeling that he might be gay, and in the 1980s, that was a way bigger deal than it would have been today, right? It was, I think people, that rumor, I have no idea whether it's true or not, but that rumor followed him around his whole career, and we have forgotten how far we have come in 30 years. 20 years. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, I was going to say it was a more androgynous time. So, the 80s, you look at just the music and the way people dressed and stuff, that he fit in that respect. But I mean, put it this way, it would have been, I think nowadays I just don't think it would even really be a discussion. No. Or nobody would, I think it really would have damaged him in 1984. Yeah. It would have been a bad thing.
There's a lot. Am I wrong? When I think back to that era, how many high-profile professional athletes were flamboyant in that way? I mean, was there an equivalent of like a Terrell Owens, or in the early '80s, in that period, late '70s, '80s?
You have to look at like I guess maybe a couple of figure skaters, gymnastics. I don't think any professional athletes.
Yeah.
Where, it was more in Hollywood than anything.
Yeah.
Where you.
No, he was just before his time, I think.
Well, now, this is going on a huge tangent, but this is going to be a really interesting next couple of years here in sports, because, like, for instance, a featherweight came out of the closet yesterday, nobody cared. And we're taking these little baby steps. I've been predicting this on the podcast for 2 years. We're taking these little baby steps toward. Yeah. I think the first big one is going to be a high-profile retired athlete who comes out.
Yeah.
And then the next big one will be somebody who's actually playing who comes out. And I think when the retired athlete comes out, people are going to think it's great. They're going to applaud them, and the story will go away in a day.
Yeah.
But when the star athlete comes out, I don't think it's going to be a big deal, and I think the big deal is going to be about how he's kind of like a hero.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've said this before, in a weird way, it's kind of a good career move.
Yeah,
it really could push somebody to another level of fame.
it was interesting. But years ago, I did a piece. About 10 years ago, I did a piece in the New Yorker, profile of Rick Warren, the incredibly powerful, influential evangelical megachurch minister in California. And he said something. He's a relatively socially conservative guy, as you can imagine. I was interviewing him, and he said something I'll never forget, which is we started to talk about gay marriage. This is in probably 98, 99. And he said, we've lost that one. He's like, it's over. This is 10 years ago. Said, if you talk to anyone under the age of 25, they just don't care. It's like there's nothing someone like me can do on this one. And I think that was very astute. And I think you're right on this. It's going to be a little bit of a blow up, and then it's going to be business as usual.
When you're interviewing somebody and they say something like that, I mean, what is your reaction to that?
I thought it was. I don't know. I just thought it was fascinating. I made him explain it a little better. It was. He said lots of interesting things. He's a very, very interesting guy. So that was in the context of, and it made me realize, these, even those people who have very, very strong feelings about people coming out of closets and homosexuality and things, they're not dumb. They can see which way the wind's blowing, and the wind's not blowing in their direction.
Yeah. I mean, even like something like The New Normal, which was a show that started, I think a couple weeks ago on NBC. I was surprised to find out that was the first same-sex couple show.
Is that right?
Yeah. Or like the first sitcom where you have you've had like Modern Family has a same-sex couple, but this is the first one that's actually built around the same-sex couple in a traditional sitcom way, and so it does make you think like, yeah. All right, well, maybe we haven't gotten all the way.
Well, well, of course, you're forgetting though. You're forgetting Sesame Street. Remember?
Bert and Ernie.
Bert and Ernie. I remember reading. Yeah, I remember reading about that. I'm sorry. That's true. That's a gay couple. That's the first gay couple.
It is first televised gay couple. Interesting.
All of the right-wingers used to make a big fuss about this, and I remember thinking, oh, no, that's not true. And then I interviewed once all of the original people who did Sesame Street, and that was so a stealth gay couple. It was the whole point of Sesame Street was that there was this covert downtown New York 1960s hippie liberal agenda behind it, right? It's all about integrating an urban block, right? Only using puppets. Of course they had a gay couple. Like, it's like, what
Yeah, well, could they come out and admit it now at least?
I kind of wish they did, but it's at the point now where, Sesame Street's in, it's in Saudi Arabia. It would be problematic. Yeah. You would have to go back and sort of airbrush over some. By the way, it's way funnier when you realize that when you view it as an adult, you realize, oh, right, they're like.
I wrote about this. I didn't realize it until my daughter was watching it, like 4 years ago. I was like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Never realized.
Remember the point of Sesame Street from the very beginning was they really wanted parents to watch the show with their kids. And this was a completely novel notion at the time. So in order to make this happen, they deliberately wrote everything on two levels. So the show is full of elaborate cultural jokes, double entendres, characters who are standing in for something bigger to keep the adult interested in the show, right? So this isn't some private joke. It's an explicit part of the strategy behind the show is to have this kind of second layer of adult-oriented humor.
So you think Cookie Monster was like a stealth druggie?
Your guess is as good as mine. What is he doing? What is he doing wandering around the show like that?
Oh no, Cookie Monster, he's overdosing again.
He clearly is someone with impulse control. What's that about?
And maybe Cookie Monster was a facsimile for a drinking problem or something. Let's go back to Ben Johnson. Canada has not had, I wouldn't say Canada's had a ton of sports victories outside of hockey. And, would you say he was the most famous Canadian athlete the last 30 years other than Gretzky?
Oh, wow. Well, in the moment, yeah. So remember, there's Donovan Bailey who wins in '96. Another Jamaican, by the way. But Bailey is. I don't think Bailey ever has the kind of he never has the kind of stature that Johnson had.
No.
And to put it in perspective, in 1972, in 1976, when the games were in Montreal, Greg Joy, a Canadian high jumper, gets a silver medal, and you would have thought that he was the first man to land on the moon. It was huge. Americans, because you win like 79 million gold medals, you're totally jaded. You think when someone wins a silver and is an American, they always talk about how that person failed and they blew it and there's all this stuff gnashing of teeth. Greg Joy came in second, and we were just like beside ourselves. I mean, we practically put the guy on a stamp. In fact, I'm sure we probably did put him on a stamp. So for someone, you have to put a gold medal's value is relative to the total number of gold medals that your country wins in that sport. So we didn't win any. I don't know if we'd ever won a men's track and field gold medal to that point. So this was like massive. I mean, it was.
And then the other thing with Ben Johnson, Lewis was this monolith coming out of the '84 Olympics, right? Like, He was the Jesse Owens of this half of the century. And then all of a sudden, this guy from Canada comes out of nowhere and just starts kicking his ass.
Yeah.
And Lewis can't beat him. And this was Lewis's prime. It wasn't even like Lewis had his prime already. This was like we were entering the salad years, not the salad years, I guess the prime years. What are salad years?
Salad days.
Good or bad? Salad days.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I'm turning into my mother. We were turning into salad days for Lewis, and here's Ben Johnson out of nowhere just killing him. And Lewis.
There's great footage.
Kept intimating that he was cheating, right?
Oh, yeah. And it was great. Remember there's great footage in the documentary of Lewis after getting beat. He sort of sidles in Rome at the World Championships in '87. He kind of sidles up to Johnson, and Johnson's like, doesn't want to talk to him. This is a great little dramatic moment that you would have missed at the time. And basically, Lewis, of course, is convinced that not only is Johnson cheating, but that he false started.
Yep.
Which is this other thing, it's sort of, he was just pissed on so many levels. Like, I can't believe I lost. I can't believe he got away with a false start. I can't believe he's obviously doping. There's a picture. I remember seeing a picture of Ben Johnson after he was disqualified in '88 of him coming out of the blocks. I think it was in Sports Illustrated. And there's two things that are so bizarre. One is that his eyes are yellow.
Yeah.
Which apparently, I guess, is a side effect of steroid use. And there's so much water retention in his muscles that it looks like if you pricked his bicep with a pin, it would explode. It would like spurt in your face. I mean, that's what it looks like. I mean, he's so. It's an extraordinary photograph, actually. It's worth going back and looking at it. But.
And you mentioned the Lewis part, and I guess we'll never know. This is actually what I liked about this documentary. Over just seeing the footage again, all that stuff. Like, I don't know what happened. We're all gonna have our theories. Like, I feel like it's the kind of thing. I'm excited for my friends to see it and talk about it with them. What do you think? Do you think Lewis was cheating? Do you think all of those guys were cheating? Like, I don't know. And especially the end, which I'm not going to give away because it's a little bit of a monkey wrench at the end. But that part.
We can't talk about that? I guess we'll leave it.
I don't want to give that away because I think a lot of people will be listening to this before. Yeah. But, man, right. I mean, just with a spoiler alert, like, were you buying that or no? We don't have to say what it was.
Well, it's funny. On this mysterious twist at the end, I have, because I'm obsessed with this particular race, Charlie Francis, who is Ben Johnson's coach, and who is he is the Pied Piper of steroid use in track and field. He's the first really sophisticated consumer of all of these, for his athletes, of all of these drugs. And he writes he's dead now, but he wrote an autobiography a couple of years after Johnson's busted and he's been disgraced, which is completely fascinating. Because Charlie Francis is a really, really charismatic, smart guy. And he walks you through what exactly happened in Seoul. And he is, with respect to this mysterious twist, he's very clearly on one side of the mysterious twist. And I've always been convinced by his explanation. And so I had that bias going in. But, you know, for those who are obsessed with this issue as I am, there's a voluminous literature on the 1988 100 meters.
What's the best book?
The best book is Charlie Francis's, which is called Speed Trap. But there was a book written in England this summer called Race of the Century. Came out only in England. I've forgotten the exact title, which is actually pretty good too, in which he does the same thing as the doc does. Tracks down a lot of the players. And you just realize how crazily murky all this stuff is. And also, here's the other thing. It's the canary in the coal mine. It begins in track and field, and then every other sport goes through a version of this over the course of the next decade. That's
but here's what I don't understand about that. I agree with you. But track and field doesn't have the most money. Like, you would think, like, all right, what sports have the most money? That's where all the whatever advancements that you could get, that's what would be the sport. Like, you would think soccer and basketball and tennis, which I think are the three ways to basically give yourself the biggest advantage and make money. I would think those would be the three sports.
No, but you know, I'm reminded of the famous quote by Henry Kissinger about why battles in academia are so vicious. He said, why are battles in academia so vicious? Because the stakes are so low. That's what it is. There's nothing else. In track, all you had, especially in those years, all you had was winning. You didn't get paid anything real. You got the larger culture didn't care that much about you. So in a situation where everything is riding on your particular time down to the hundredth of a second, then I feel like the stakes are, your motivation for using drugs is greater. In football, you can have a very long and creditable and lucrative career without using drugs in that era and in today's era. In that particular moment in track, you couldn't do anything without using drugs, I think, or very little.
So you just made the case against Carl Lewis then?
Well, the only thing I hold out about with Carl Lewis is that Carl Lewis was such an extraordinary athlete, he didn't have to. Now, I realize everyone always says that. Lance Armstrong said that.
Yeah.
Part of me wants to believe that's true with Lewis. Lewis is, if I had to make a list of the 5 most extraordinary athletes of any kind in the 20th century, he's in my top 5.
Oh, that's an interesting list.
I think it's MJ, Gretzky. Wait, I'm going to run out of... Let's do 10.
Are you saying best careers or best athlete?
So I'm going to say, if you did a 20th century, flat-out, all athletes of every type, top 10 list, who are the transcendent talents, performers?
So we're not talking about just physical stature or like somebody who was one of a kind physically.
I'm talking about the people who left a mark on their sport.
Well, see,
Carl Lewis is absolutely in that top 10.
Oh, he's unquestionably in there.
Yeah.
I think Ali's in there, Jordan, Gretzky, and I got to say probably Tiger.
You would go Tiger, not Nicholas.
I'm assuming Tiger is at least going to do a few more things over the course of his career.
Yeah. We got to throw in a cricketer, by the way. Otherwise, you're going to get hate mail from now until the end of time.
Well, I mean, a lot of people would put Federer in there, no question.
Yeah.
I personally, I don't know. I'd have to look. This is the kind of thing where I'd want to look at everybody for like 2 weeks before I came up with my conclusion. But that's why it's a good exercise in a way, because if somebody just jumps out of your head like that guy has to be on the list, then you know they deserve to be on the list. And I agree with you. I think Carl Lewis, when you throw in the long jump thing, which was just
the
amazing.
long jump alone, I mean, he'd almost be on that list if we didn't even consider his sprinting. His long jump, if you look at his all-time long jump, there's never been a long jumper before or since who even comes close. He just was. This is a man who jumped over 28 feet. I don't even know how many times. I mean, as a matter of routine, he would jump over 28 feet. The Olympics was won this year by a white guy, first of all.
I was there. It was right in front of me. It was right in front of me. Greg Rutherford, Britain's own.
And he jumped what did he jump? 27.2? I mean, something that Carl Lewis...
No, it was lower than that.
I forgot. But it was a jump that Carl Lewis today could jump further than. I mean, it was I have to say the Jamaican in me was so appalled by the notion that a white English guy had won the long jump that I
think people have just given up on that event. Seems to be. And then this was actually in London. This was a topic. Like, could Usain Bolt in his spare time just win the long jump by not even training? Just because if you just do the physics of it, how fast he runs and how long his legs are, he should jump 28 feet every time.
Well, but you're neglecting the. You're right. He would have. I mean, but you're neglecting the importance of technique. I mean, the technique is not.
Well, yeah. I'm saying like they did studies like if you could teach him the basic amount of technique to be decent at this, it would basically be impossible for him not to win. Yeah. For like you've created the perfect long jumper with the body he has and the strides on.
That's right. No, that's right.
Do you get sensitive at all? Because everybody, has at least inferred that the Jamaican team might be cheating, or that's always been kind of dogging them these last 5 years.
Of course I get sensitive about that. I'm like, how dare you? We win because we're the best.
Right. But it is a little strange, right, that they've had so much success.
Here's the thing. It's not like it's come out of nowhere. So it's not like East Germany in the 70s when the East Germans were terrible, and all of a sudden they were crushing world records. Jamaicans had been dominant in sprinting going back to the 50s.
Yeah.
Remember, a Jamaican, Arthur Wint, is it Arthur Wint who wins, or I've forgotten the name, either wins or definitely medals in the men's 400 meters, and then you had Don Quarry in the 70s, and you have this long, illustrious history. And so it's like, this is a country that takes its sprinting really, really seriously, and has done so for. So I'm, is there the sudden burst they've had over the last 8 years suspicious? I don't know. I mean, is the Kenyan and Ethiopian resurgence of the last 20 years suspicious, or have they just started to take these sports really seriously?
I would lean toward it not being suspicious, because I do think there's something. I don't know. This sounds like something you would have written about, but I don't remember reading it about the clusters. And especially with smaller countries, and you're going to have a certain level of athletic talent and prowess in every country.
How efficiently do you tap into it? It's like, and you're not missing. There is almost no chance that there could be a Jamaican schoolboy or schoolgirl who has the talent to run, a world-class time, who somehow is passed over or missed. It's not possible, right? So you would have 100% capitalization of the available talent. So if you do that same analysis in the United States with, say, distance running, what percentage of the potentially world-class distance runners do we actually find, and whose talent do we actually exploit? It's less than 10%. Right?
Oh, and then you're talking about sprinters. I would say it's like 0.0003%, right?
Yeah. I mean, we don't even know how many guys in the NFL could be, for example, or how many guys sitting in jail could be potentially world-class sprinters? Lots.
Well, people have been saying this is this is a big problem with baseball now. It's just them getting just pure athletes because those people are gravitating toward basketball and football.
Yeah.
So it's more money quicker. You don't have to toil in the minors for 4 or 5 years.
But can you answer that question? Is it really, if you were going to be completely rational, so let's imagine you are 17 years old, and you are an absolutely superb athlete. You could potentially choose basketball, football, or baseball. Those are your 3 options. What is the rational? And let's assume as well that you have a reasonable guarantee of making the majors in all 3 of those sports, right? Pro level.
Yeah.
Which one do you choose? If you're just behaving, let's take out love of the game. Let's just say you would like to maximize your financial performance over the course of your athletic lifetime. What's the rational choice?
And you're saying I have superior athletic skills, like I'm like a 5-tool guy.
You're a 5-tool guy. Why are you down on baseball? I would have thought baseball gives you the opportunity for the longest career.
Oh, the answer is baseball, and it's actually even a more specific answer than that. You want to be an offensive baseball player because you don't want to be a pitcher because it's too easy to blow out something.
No, you want to be like a first baseman or a right fielder.
Yeah, or like a left fielder. Would be like the perfect position, like somebody like you have the kind of career that Barry Bonds had, where you're almost overqualified to be in left field.
Yeah, but wait, if that's the case, if that's the rational choice, then why is what's happening in baseball? Why do we have this sense that everyone's gravitating towards, the great athletes are gravitating to other sports?
It's a really good question. A lot of people have asked it. I think part of it has to do with the fact that you don't have that AAU type culture that basketball has with baseball. It's harder to play baseball. You know, in basketball, you just go to wherever. As long as you have a ball and a rim, you can play.
Yeah.
In baseball, you have to get people together. And then, this is my own personal theory. I don't know if I'm right, but I think if you're like a 14, 15, 16-year-old, who do you want to be? You want to be LeBron James. You want to be Kobe Bryant. You want to be, I don't know, Adrian Peterson. I don't know if you're sitting there going, I want to be Barry Bonds or any of these steroid guys from the last 20 years. I mean, now they have, you could argue with like Mike Trout and Bryce Harper, who are the two most exciting people who have come in together into the league in some time. Maybe you could argue those guys are going to swing the next generation of 12 and 13-year-olds, but I don't know. The other problem is baseball is long and boring.
Yeah.
You know, the games are 3 hours, and they're losing the next generation. You have some kids are watching, but not a lot, and I just don't see people. We're about to hit the greatest baseball month, and I don't know how many kids are going to be sitting in front of their TV every day watching 3.5-hour baseball games.
Do you take either of your kids to baseball games?
Have not taken either yet. And you know why? Because I'm afraid. I'm going to be devastated if I take my son and he just doesn't care. You know? Like, I feel like I just have failed at a dad. The best sport is...
You take your daughter to hockey games, to basketball games, to football games?
Yep. Have not taken her to a baseball game yet.
Wow.
You know what? The real reason is because I want to take her to Fenway. She's been to Fenway with my dad, but I don't want her first game to be a non-Red Sox game. But, you know, the irony is hockey, which probably isn't even coming back this year. Hockey is the best kid sport. It's just built for kids. It's ADD. It's just nonstop guys skating around and hitting. And you also have the 2 breaks, which is huge. You get 2 20-minute breaks. You can go to the bathroom, go get food. They're blaring stuff on the Jumbotron the entire time. The fans are funny. Like, it's the best sport to take your kid to, I think.
I had not thought about that.
Yeah. Baseball, you go. This is from what I've heard of all my friends. This is one of the reasons I haven't taken my kids yet. My friends who go and take their kids say, they sit there for like an inning, they look around, they think it's cool, and then they're like, what are we eating? So now you just basically have to feed your kid to keep them there. They're just eating pretzels and hot dogs and candy and ice cream and soda, and, you know, it's almost like you're giving them an 8-ball of cocaine.
Yeah.
And by the 5th inning, you got to get them out of there. So I'll probably take my daughter next year. But anyway, I think, you know, the other thing with basketball is how many of the marketable guys now are basketball guys? Mm-hmm. It's if you made a top 30 list, there'd be 20 NBA players in there.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that affects it too. You know, so you think the smart move? You agree with me? The smart move would be baseball.
Well, yeah, especially if there's a diminishing talent pool, a talented player can have that much more of a dominant effect. The only thing I would say is that you clearly can't make as much money in endorsements if you are a tier 1 player in baseball as you can in basketball. But I will point out that very, very few basketball players make any money in endorsements. The list is it's like 3 of them, right?
It's not long. It's not more than 10.
It drops off really, really dramatically, and everyone else is doing used car ads. You know, on late night TV in New York, you will sometimes see guys who you thought were legitimate stars. Like, oh, I know what it is. What you ever see the Ray Lewis used car dealership ads?
No.
Ray Lewis does for some Baltimore area car dealership, he does these appalling ads, which you can sometimes catch on TV. I'm like, Ray Lewis. Now, you would have thought in a rational world that Ray Lewis would have a national advertising presence, right? He does have that one ad with deodorant, right?
Yeah.
You'd have thought, oh, he's going to be lots of that. No, the guy's, you know, he's doing that. He's got that one outlet nationally, and then the rest of the time he's doing car dealership ads, which are hilarious, by the way.
They're not. There should be a better way to organize them on YouTube or on some internet site or something, because I love the local ads too. Local ads are my favorite.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the cheating thing for a second.
Yeah.
Because I found something out during the Olympics that I think it's pretty known. I didn't personally know, and I don't know whether I just never read about it or whatever. But basically, like with the testosterone level, you're allowed to have like up to 4 times the amount of your testosterone.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can be at 3.8 and it's fine.
Well, 4 times.
I mean, it's
remember,
dicey.
No, remember, so testosterone levels naturally vary enormously. So and testosterone is something that is influenced, among other things. It is socially or environmentally influenced. So if you're working in a company and you get promoted, your testosterone level will go up, right? Or you're in any kind of dominant position, your testosterone level will go up. It is a reflection. It is both a driver of your status and a reflection of your status. So it's an incredibly hard number to pin down when we say what's someone's natural or normal testosterone level. The answer is we don't know. It's a range. So it's not illegitimate to say that an athlete, particularly if you're talking about a male athlete at the Olympics, you're talking about a man, a dominant alpha male in his early 20s who is undergoing the single most important, stressful, but also rewarding event of his life. Is his testosterone going to be elevated? Sure it is, right?
Especially being in an Olympic village, all around all those cute little Olympic athletes walking
Exactly.
around.
I mean, what do you think Ryan Lochte's T level was after a week?
It went up.
I think it went up, as would ours in that situation. So it goes back to this thing that, like, this drug testing is not cut and dried at all. I mean, it's this sort of hazy, weird, complex thing, and you can't. I think the danger. It's one of those instances where if you want a drug testing system that errs on the side of caution, in other words, a false positive when you accuse someone of using when they're not is way more of a problem than a false negative when you miss someone who is. And so that means you got to skew it and give people the benefit of the doubt.
You have some Lance Armstrong thoughts.
Yeah, Lance. Well, Lance is. So it looks like Lance doped, right? I mean, I think we can say that with a fair degree of. But it also looks like everybody was doping.
It sounds like, from the evidence we have, here's just the evidence. I mean, if this was an episode of Law and Order and we just presented the evidence is he was on a team. He was the leader of a team where all these other people on the team were caught cheating, right?
Yeah.
That's not good.
Yeah.
He lost a testicle to cancer. I mean, that's just a red flag. Is there definitely a correlation? I don't know. Does it worry me? I don't know.
Yeah, I have heard people say that the particular kind of cancer he had it can be associated with a certain kind of PED use.
I mean, it's just, who knows?
Yeah.
But you have that. Then you have the fact that other people were constantly accusing him of cheating. Then you have the fact that the stuff he was doing was superhuman. Yeah. And then you have the fact that instead of continuing to fight to clear his name, he just gave up.
Yeah.
And basically said, well, screw you guys. You guys can think what you want.
I have some sympathy for him in the sense that there was a holy vendetta to go after him. I mean, millions of our taxpayer dollars were spent in the pursuit of him as well as the pursuit of...
which is idiotic.
Clemens is the more outrageous case. But here's my thing about Lance, and that is our paradigm's wrong for biking. What if we thought about bicycling as just the equivalent of auto racing? It's Formula One. What is Formula One? It's the combination of a car, so an instrument, a driver, and the driver's particular skills, and science. So Formula One teams compete on those 3 levels simultaneously. We compete to see who has the fastest driver. We compete to see who has the best car, and we also compete on our ability to innovate within the rules, to use science to further the performance of our driver within those constraints. So, what if you think about Lance and Tour de France racing or competitive bicycling as automobile racing? It's on 3 levels. You got a bike, you got a driver, and you got science. And when you look at what Lance is alleged to have done, basically he was better than everybody else at using PEDs. He was the guy who sat down and was rigorous and focused and thoughtful and intelligent and cutting edge in how to use them and apply them and make himself better. Like, I don't know. So why is that a bad thing? Like, he's being rewarded for being the best at his game, right? It was an element in the competition, and he used that element better than anybody else. Why don't we just make that part of the definition of what it means to be a great bicyclist?
Well, the counter argument would be, what if somebody just wants to do it naturally? Then they're not allowed to compete under the same playing field.
But I mean, it's like saying,
which I get.
What I'm saying. But if you use the Formula One analogy, you don't compete naturally in Formula One. You take it for granted that part of competing for Formula One is having a team of hotshot engineers behind you who are fine-tuning your car to within an inch of its life. I mean, at a certain point, here's the thing. At a certain point, you can't win these battles. Like, what you have is an arms race between the drugs and the methods used to detect the drugs. And in this arms race, the drug people are always winning, right? By definition, the tool to detect the drug that's on the market, the newest drug on the market, is going to be one step behind. You can't develop the test until you know what people are using. So I don't know how this ends. If you could never win this case, if you're always going to be one step behind the cheaters, maybe it's better off to incorporate cheating into your definition of the sport.
I guess the part I don't totally get, and I know this point has been made, but it seems like some science is okay, but other science isn't. It's okay for me to take a dead person's ligament and put it in my body and then try to compete with that.
Yeah.
But yet it's not okay for me to replace my blood with better blood, right?
Yeah.
I can't do that.
I mean, it's okay to do LASIK.
I can't change my blood.
I can do LASIK. I can make my eyesight better.
I can do LASIK. I can make my eyesight better, but I can't put better oxygen in my blood.
Here's another one. How about this? I get injured, and I'm a baseball pitcher. I hurt my arm, and I have a reasonable expectation that through the use of human growth hormone, I can recover, or some other drug, I can recover in 1 week instead of 2 weeks. That's apparently illegal. Why is that illegal? Why is there a rule that says I can't use cutting-edge medical technology to recover faster so I can go back to doing my job? I don't get that.
Well, and then you get into the whole thing with human growth hormone about steroids are really bad, especially the more you use them.
Yeah.
Human growth hormone people seem to be divided on how bad it is. I mean, it's bad if you use a lot of it, but that's anything. It's bad if I took 14 aspirin today.
Yeah.
So it seems like from what I've read about human growth hormone, a lot of times they give it to older people. Mm-hmm. They give it to people who, especially older people who have been injured, or and not a lot of bad side effects unless you go over the top.
Or how about this? So we know that testosterone levels are hugely important in your ability to compete at a high level. We also know that as men get older, their testosterone levels naturally decline. So why is it? Let's say I'm a baseball player, and in my 20s, my testosterone levels are super high. They're in the 90th percentile. And then I get into my 30s, my game starts to decline a bit, and my testosterone levels start to decline as well, and I'm down to the 70th percentile. So suppose I said, well, I want to take some testosterone and get back to where I was before, to the 90th percentile, right? Now, why is that wrong? I'm simply restoring myself to part of myself to a level I was at a couple of years earlier that has the effect of not of making my performance supernatural, but simply of prolonging my performance at a level I had already reached. I do lots of things as a 30-year-old to prolong my performance. I work out harder, I eat better, I get more sleep. Why are those things fine, but somehow using a drug to take my T back to where it was before is wrong?
I joke about this all the time because Jacoby and I still play basketball all the time, and I'm older than Jacoby, but that last summer my knee, I just love playing, and my body's just old. And my knee was really hurting after one thing. I was like, I would take HGH in a heartbeat if I could go out there and play and not feel any pain. Just tell me where to buy it. Can I get it at CVS? Does somebody have to prescribe it? Like, just tell me how to get it.
You probably at this point, I think I'm quite sure that now, if you went on the internet, you could probably get it.
I'm sure I could. But I'm just saying this is what we were talking about afterwards.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine being like a 38-year-old NBA player or 39-year-old. I don't want to target an age like I'm talking about somebody, but
Yeah.
an NBA player in their late 30s
How about
who has a chance to play one more year for $10 million, you know, who might have a couple kids or been divorced a few times or whatever, and it's like, oh man, so if I do this, I'm going to be at this level and I'll get paid this.
Yeah. What if,
You know.
or the better way to phrase it is, I'm a 50-year-old construction worker. I do hard physical labor. I find that I have difficulty getting up in the morning now, so I want to take a little growth hormone or testosterone to do my job a little better. Nobody would look askance at me if I did that, right? It's only because we have a very, very particularized and almost fetishistic notion of purity in sports that we insist that the athlete has to be treated separately from the construction worker, even though they both have the same physical needs.
But the funny thing is that purity has been trampled for the past 70 years.
Yeah.
Everybody's been looking for an edge that entire time, and we'll still look for an edge. I mean, how did you feel about now we've had a bunch of people do it, but Kobe going to Germany to get that treatment that wasn't legal here?
Why is it not legal here? That's what I thought. If it genuinely can help, and you guys ran a great piece on this, I think by Journal there, right?
Yep.
About which sort of raised the question of it wasn't clear whether this actually works or not. But let's assume it does for the moment. If this is an experimental treatment that helps athletes prolong their career and play better even after injuries, why on earth couldn't that help hundreds of thousands of people in America? I mean, why isn't this something that we aren't testing actively in this country? Why do you have to go to like Baden-Baden or wherever the hell he went to get the procedure done?
We're sending Jay Kang there. Jay Kang's going to get it done.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're going to send him. Listen, I mean, part of me wonders, you mentioned that moment with baseball when we look back after and we felt like we had our heads in the sand.
Yeah.
Right? I do worry sometimes if that's also the case now and our heads are in the sand and we don't realize it.
That we don't realize how many people are using right now.
Yeah. I worry about that sometimes. And especially like the stuff, you look at some of the stuff that the psychers were doing and how easy it would be to do, especially in sports like basketball and soccer.
Yeah.
The endurance stuff.
Yeah.
You know, if you got to play a Champions League game on a Wednesday and then you have a Premier League game on a Saturday, you got to run around for 2 straight hours, top of your game. And somebody says, yeah, we're just going to put a little more oxygen in your blood. You cool with that? Yeah, tell me how to do it. You know, I think that would be, is this legal? Well, not really, but they're not going to catch you.
Yeah.
And same thing for basketball. I mean,
Well,
they might test for that. I don't know. I don't know if they test for that.
It's less of an issue in sports where there aren't those same kind of individual records, right? I mean, it's not as I can see soccer being a lot more tolerant of this. I mean, the issue with the 100 meters is that it's all about the time, and if you feel like someone's getting a shortcut to a time. But would I be really upset if I heard that some great football player was using T or HGH? I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, soccer player. I don't think I'd care that much. I mean, I assume it's already happening.
You can watch NFL Network shows a lot of games from the mid '90s, late '90s, early 2000s, and you'll see some of your heroes who look a little bit different than they do now.
You're
That's all
naming
I'm gonna
names,
say.
Jim, Bill, or
No, I'm just gonna say you'll watch a couple games and go, wow, that guy looks a little different. And it's just we didn't know. We just assumed that people were all looking a certain way, but I really wonder about the endurance stuff and how hard that is to catch. And I also wonder, like, at what point do you draw the line, you know? Like, what's the difference between what Kobe did and what's the difference between Derrick Rose having a dead guy's ligament in his knee and I don't know. It's basically all science. I mean, I think we can all agree that there's some sort of a moral line that could be crossed. Barry Bonds crossed it when his head grew. You know, when his head actually increased in size.
We can say that head increased. head size increases will make that the great sort of the moral Rubicon when it comes to drugs.
Yeah, or like if your teeth are actually separating from your jaw and you're growing gaps in your teeth, like obviously something's going horribly wrong. But I'm going to be real interested because, don't you think this is going to be one of those things where, like, I don't know. So the first steroids era was in probably the 80s. We didn't realize it was going on in American sports, and then so a lot of these guys will be older now. At some point, they're going to want to talk about it. I feel like.
Yeah.
They'll be in like their mid 60s or whatever. The age where you start selling your trophies and things like that, and they'll have a chance to make some money on a tell-all piece or something. I feel like some of those guys will eventually talk.
I think it's going to come out. But
go ahead.
This goes to the conclusion I reached, which grows firmer with each passing year, which is that none of us want our children to play, even if they had the opportunity to play any kind of serious professional sport, because when you go, the meaning of what it means to be a world-class athlete has changed dramatically in the last 25 years. And it is now such an extreme position to be in, phenomenon, that requires, first of all, such an extraordinary amount of time and sacrifice, but also that requires such a physical commitment. By physical commitment, I mean things like altering your body using drugs in order to compete at the highest level. It's just not. Whereas I can imagine growing up in America in the 1950s and saying, how wonderful would it be if little Jimmy went on to play baseball or be a swimmer or something. And I can think of that, being in that exact same position today and saying, there is no way. It's over. I mean, I just don't want. I think that sport is being that kind of elite sport. I think is being confined to a smaller and smaller of more extreme people who are willing to make truly extraordinary sacrifices that most of us don't and shouldn't want to make.
It's a really good point. And the other part of that, which you didn't mention, the amount of time you have to spend when your child is between the ages of basically 6 and 17. But actually, I should say 6 and 14. Because there's this whole culture that I didn't really know about until my daughter hit a certain age. It's basically the travel team culture.
Oh.
And that eventually becomes the AU culture. But, I mean, my daughter has friends who every weekend they're going to 7-year-old baseball games and 7-year-old soccer games. It's crazy. They're driving 2 hours.
Yeah.
The parents, that's what they spend the whole weekend on. And then you have...
You know what the rule should be? The drive to the game should not be longer than the game. And it is.
It would be a good
do
rule.
it, right?
She was doing gymnastics and she was good at it. And they met with us and they were like, we want your daughter to start coming more. She has a chance to be really good. Like, oh, that's cool. What does that entail? Well, she's got to now come 3 days a week. She has to come Friday nights from 6 to 9 p.m. It's going to cost this much. And my wife and I were like, why would we do that? Is she going to make the Olympic team as a gymnast? She's going to be like 5'10". What is the purpose of that? But, you get into that.
Wait, what did they say to you? What did they say when you said that?
I didn't say that. We kind of were like, oh, thank you. Yeah, we'll talk about it. And then, that was it. We pulled her from gymnastics. But, you talk about, like, not just the Olympics, but you talk about the baseball culture is a lot more all-encompassing than you could ever imagine. I can't believe there are people traveling 2 hours for a 7-year-old baseball game.
That's crazy.
That's weird.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and not only that, the level of private instruction that goes on in things like baseball. I mean, these kids have their own hitting coaches when they're 8 years old.
Where do you stand on when kids should start playing football?
Never.
Oh, you go. Yeah, that's right. I
I'm
forgot.
an extremist.
You're a football abolitionist.
I'm a football abolitionist. But I think the only. I mean, I was a runner growing up, and running is still reasonable because until you're in your 20s, you literally can't work out for more than an hour a day. I mean, it's physically too demanding.
Yeah.
So I think the only sports that are reasonable are sports where there is a kind of hard cap on how much time is required of a child. But swimming is absurd. I mean, completely crazy. I don't swim, and when I have children, I'm not even going to let them see a pool until the danger of them potentially becoming competitive swimmers has passed. 6 hours in the pool a day. Are you kidding me?
Well, it's
For
also
what?
like as a parent, you're just sitting there and you can't even tell who won half the time.
It boggles my mind why
Some
people
people
would,
love it though. I have a friend of mine whose son swims and he's very competitive with it. He's just good at it, you know. And I think if your kids are good at something, you can't really pick what it is. If they like doing it, that's just the way it goes. I think as a parent, would you rather, you know, be going to basketball games or swimming meets? I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably basketball. I remember when I was covering high school sports for the Herald and I was going to all these different things. Like I always used to like volleyball. It was the best one to go to. It was women's volleyball was the best. The girls were always cute. You could always follow it. Like you were indoors. You weren't getting rained on or anything. But
yeah. No, there's lots of pluses there.
yeah. So yeah, this is that whole youth sports culture. Pretty fascinating. Wait, we want to talk about one more thing, but we ran out of time. What was the last thing we wanted to hit?
We want to talk about Lance. We want to talk about Canada and the whole. I mean, I have to say that was the thing. I mean, the movie the documentary had such personal salience to me because it's like I said, it was the world I grew up in. But just hearing the people, there's a track meet in Kingston every year called Champs. Champs is the Jamaican high school track and field championships.
Yeah.
It is a high school meet that might be one of the best track meets in the world. And it is, I've never been, I've always wanted to go. It is, if you can imagine, it's in Kingston, if you can imagine, like, it is the most exciting sporting event in the country, and it's just a massive, loud, unbelievably exciting, crazy, in the middle of Kingston event happening, right? It's just, and the kids, these are high school kids who are running world-class times, right? Because Jamaica, that's what it takes to.
So is it one of those situations where the place that it's being held is almost underqualified for the actual magnitude of the event?
Oh yeah, I mean it's like you could hold this in one of the great track and field venues in the world and call it a.
Yeah.
But I've always that particular world to me is so unbelievably compelling. I mean,
I remember what I wanted to ask you, and this will be the last thing.
Sure.
You were super duper excited about Mo Farah.
I was.
And that whole him against the Ethiopians and the Kenyans and the 5K and the 10K. And
yeah.
What's interesting is my experience being there and watching how what they cared about, what were the focal points for people to talk about in the news, the conversations. Like they didn't even show Jessica Innes, I don't think, on TV here. And people are asking me like, what was your best thing you've been to? And that was one of the best things when she won the heptathlon. And people are like, oh yeah, they didn't show that here. It's like, what?
And I point out Jessica Innes half Jamaican. Thank you very much.
Oh yeah, good point. But the Mo Farah thing, and you were saying like this is one of the great moments in long distance, or the great situations in long distance history with.
It was the 5K.
Yeah.
5K was a classic exercise in the tragedy of the commons, which is an economic paradigm. So Farah has the sixth or maybe seventh fastest time in the year in the world this year, going into the 5,000 meters in the Olympics. Almost all of the Ethiopians and the Kenyans and the Moroccans had run faster than him, and in order to beat him, all they had to do was take the race out fast to run a world-class time, right? Fast time. If they don't do that, they're going to lose. Why? Because as he demonstrated in 10,000 meters, he is the fastest closing kick in the world, right?
It's amazing in person, too.
It's astonishing last 400 meters. So what do they do in the 5,000? Knowing full well that if the race is slow, he will outkick them and they can't win. They go out really slow. So 6 guys who were better than Mo Farah ran a race designed to let Mo Farah win, right? Why? Well, because if they were going to run a really fast pace, which would give all of those 6 people a chance at winning, one person would have to take it out hard. And that person would put themselves at a relative disadvantage to the other 5.
The rabbit.
The rabbit. One person had to be the rabbit and sort of sacrifice themselves. So because none of them wanted to be in a rabbit, none of them wanted to put themselves at a relative disadvantage to the other 5, they all adopted a strategy that meant that none of them could win. Do you understand? This is the tragedy of the commons. Because they could not act collectively, even though acting collectively was in all of their best interest, it gave all of them a chance at winning, right? Because they wouldn't accept that one person would be at a slight relative disadvantage, they said, you know what, we'd all rather lose. And
so you think they should have done like a whole, like Drew Strauss, short straws the rabbit?
totally. Normally, what they do in those races is they assign. The Kenyans will pick their weakest member and say, "You've got to take it out hard if there's this situation." But all of them thought they had a shot at winning, so none of them ran in a way that allowed them to win. And if you watch the 5K, Farah, the first couple laps when they're jogging, I mean, I could have kept up with him for the first couple of laps. Farah is he's last, right? Last couple of laps. If you look at his face, he can't keep the smile off his face. He knows he's won. It's over. He's like, these guys can't figure out who's going to lead. And so it's like, it's this extraordinary moment when the collective futility of his people who were better than him allowed him to walk away with a victory.
So you were watching it even as it was happening, knowing that he was going to win?
The minute they went out in whatever they went out in, 70s, I mean, it was a ridiculously slow opening pace. I was like, those guys have packed it in. And the other thing is, they knew it too. If you were, Bekele or one of these other runners in that race, by lap 4 or lap 5, they know they've lost. I mean, they know it's over. That they had to take it out hard from the beginning.
So did they do the 10K differently?
The 10K was a little different. It was a little quicker, but they hadn't. I don't think they realized in the 10K just how extraordinarily fast Mo Farah and Galen Rupp could close, because Farah he ran the last 400 meters in 51 or 52 seconds. I mean, that's extraordinary.
And the crowd definitely helped him, about 8%.
Oh yeah, it's home.
No question.
Crowd,
You're just it was just so loud and cool in there. I just think that helps.
God, I envy you seeing that. Right?
I was impressed by the American.
Galen Rupp.
Nobody did. I mean, did anybody even talk about him in America? I feel like
on the running. I mean, if you in the world of runners, he's been a big topic for a long time. He's an incredibly talented runner. He's a little fragile. He's got sort of chronic respiratory problems, asthma, things like that. So it's like the stars have to be aligned for him to run at his best. And they weren't aligned in the 5K, but they were in the 10K. I think he almost really could have won that race.
Last question.
Yeah.
Prefontaine, overrated, underrated, or properly rated?
Under.
Under. Wow.
Weird as it may seem.
Two movies made at the same time about him.
Yeah, exactly. 2 movies. Yeah, but 2 bad movies.
Oh, stop. The Billy Crudup one was a good one. You like the Billy Crudup one?
Well, how. All right, I'll give you one of them was okay. He's underrated because he is. That's the dawn of Nike, right? It's not just. He's creating the whole kind of culture that spawns Nike and spawns this kind of weird. You could make an argument that the whole the Michael Jordan, the Tiger Woods, the kind of melding of sports celebrity and business that's epitomized by Nike starts with Prefontaine, right? You have a little company that makes running shoes that gets aligned with an incredibly charismatic runner.
Who happens to be right there.
And Phil Knight says, oh my God, this is how I can completely revolutionize the world of sport. I can fuse my brand with athletic genius. And Prefontaine gets all kinds of credit for all kinds of things, kickstarting American long-distance running, being this extraordinary, compelling runner. But I don't think he ever gets enough credit for that, for being the guy who spawns that new model by which we appreciate athletic genius. You could draw a straight line from Pre through MJ and Tiger.
Underrated.
I'm
surprised. Do you think if they run the 1972 race 10 times, how many times does he win?
I don't think he ever wins.
You don't think he ever wins?
Not against Lassie Viren. I mean, remember the original drug rumors were about Lassie Viren in 72, right? He was supposed to be blood doping. And also he ran. If you go back, Lassie Viren, talk about a closer. I mean, he runs in 72 and 76. Really extraordinary races. Hard to imagine someone beating him.
This sounds like a column you need to write for Grantland. Your top 10 long-distance runners of all time.
Yeah, that'll be read by 4 people.
The Pyramid. I would read it. That sounds awesome. What was the bigger loss for Prefontaine, losing in 72 or being played by Jared Leto?
I think being played by Jared Leto.
Fourth place. I would still go with fourth place, but it's tough. I need to think about it. Malcolm Gladwell, when's your next piece running?
Not for. I'm just finishing my book, so I'm kind of flying low for the moment.
And when's your book coming out?
Next year. In 1 year from now. Exactly 1 year.
And you're not talking about this book.
It's called David and Goliath.
It's called David and Goliath.
Yeah, David and Goliath. Watch for it 1 year from now.
You're excited for this one.
I am.
You spent a few years reporting this one.
Been too long, is a more accurate way of saying it. Yes.
How was your first podcast? Did you enjoy it?
Bill, I was worried about living up to the high standard that had been set by you and all of your cronies. I'm not sure I did, but I had fun.
I had fun too, but it would have been more fun to write some of these things out.
Yeah, we'll do that next time.
Next time we'll do it. All right. Malcolm Gladwell, as always, a pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNradio.com.
Peace out.